food X causes disease Y. And the reason we know this is surveys of people who ate food and didn't eat food, and we looked up their disease conditions in their medical charts. By the way, this is headline gold. If you're a press writer in the mainstream media and you need a nutrition article, your next title of the article is, does half an egg a day prevent cancer? Or if a really slow news day, does a whole egg per day cause heart disease? Easy. This is when you get from aggregate data and it's basically useless. Don't overhaul your diet because of one headline. A lot of people think this is the core of nutritional science and they want a lot of data out of it that's very good, and that's just not where good data comes from. Introducing the all-new RP Diet Coach app, our biggest update ever. We've heard your feedback and added tons of features that you have been asking for. Adjust your macros your way, shift your macros and calories day to day and between meals, and get instant guidance when your plans change. Eat how you like, crush your goals, and get in the best shape of your life. Click the link in the description to get started. Hey folks, Dr. Mike here for RP Strength, and I have a question for you. Is nutrition science broken? Some would say yes. Others would say also yes. What? Let's take a look. So, nutrition science has a problem. And that problem is that very many people think they're getting a lot of insight out of nutritional science. Whereas the real nutritional science, TM, registered trademark, Renaissance periodization, is only able currently, for the most part, to speak in generalities, minimums and maximums, and not make very precise specific predictions. And there are a few ways in which nutrition science is, in a sense, broken or being wildly misapplied. We don't want you guys to fall for these traps. We're going to talk about 5 ways in which nutrition science is very limited, how to improve it, but also how, because you're probably not a scientist, maybe, and how you can use nutritional science to your best benefit without getting ripped off and ending up taking recommendations that were based on #science, but really weren't as scientific as you may have been led to believe. So we're going to talk about 5 things. We're going to talk about food surveys and their pretty gargantuan limitations, but also what you can get out of them. We're going to talk about the ingredients of supplements, from headlines of studies to what actually supplements do really in the body. We're going to talk about good foods versus evil foods. Essentially, if you've ever been to the, Scott, you know the grocery store, all those like homemaker magazines when you're cashing out?
Yeah.
When they're
absolutely.
like, the new superfood that'll boost your, like shit like that, right? We'll get to that. And then microbiome hype, of which there's a lot, gut bacteria stuff. And then flashy gym extras that are flashy gym extras, and some nutritional science, which is not exactly up to par, being misinterpreted, is going to try to portray as like a really, really big deal. Number 1, food surveys, or in other words, how many cups of broccoli did you eat last year? What are food surveys? They're essentially big checklists asking people how often they ate hundreds of foods over months or years previously. Sometimes you do a food recall questionnaire over the last 3 days, but typically food surveys are just like over the last 6 months or over the last year. Now, the good news is that they're cheap and scalable. The bad news, like you can get a food survey out to 10,000 people, no problem. The bad news is human memory is mildly unreliable, not just from a data sense, which is also unreliable, but from a bias sense. And also the way you ask some questions is so discordant with how people process information, sometimes you don't get very good results. For example, if I was to ask you, for about how long do you tend to have sex with your loving partner, assuming you have a loving partner and have had sex before, you might be like, oh, I don't know, like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 5 hours, whatever you're saying, whatever you're into. Scott.
27.
Thank you.
Seconds.
I was going to say, waiting for the units here. My man, 20 seconds, in and out. And so if you ask many people, hey, how long do you have sex for on average when you have sex? They'll be able to give you like a number that makes some sense. But imagine if I asked you in some kind of strange units, the sum total of which is still a logical answer that your brain doesn't process. Scott, how many times in a typical week do you stroke in and out of the vaginal orifice? Total area under curve.
It's a really easy number for me to come up with.
27. Like I said, 1 second in, 1 second out, twice a week. So that way to construct that question is like, I don't count strokes. How count strokes? And I got to multiply sessions into weeks and how many strokes per minute. Like, I'm not doing any of that. That's all nonsense right away. That's just garbage data. And so when they ask you, and how many fruit servings did you eat last year? How do you even begin to answer that question with a modicum of good data? You can even try to be honest, but it's almost impossible for you to caricature your real life into a good answer to that question that someone could be like, how sure are you about this? You'd be like, I mean, barely at all. I'm really just guessing, right? So what these surveys should be able to tell us, sometimes do and sometimes don't, are broad patterns, which eating styles link to health or disease states at a population level, not individual level. Now, food report surveys break in at least 3 different ways or kind of styles. One is people overreport, people underreport, people misremember. What do? There's this bias in a laboratory setting, especially when you're filling out a known health questionnaire. Most people, not all, most people, enough to skew the data, will underreport bad stuff. Like, how many times did you eat out at fast food last year? You're like, a few. It's way more than that. And then they overreport how much healthy stuff they're doing. Like, how many cups of broccoli did you eat last year per week? You're like, I don't know, tons, whatever. Like, if there's a Likert scale and you can circle a box, it's the biggest box or the second biggest, Scott, you like circling the second most impressive box so that you're good, but you're not trying to like take crazy credit,
Yeah. He's so humble.
Right. Like, how big is your cock? Like, it's big, but it's not the biggest, but it's big, like, it's fucking, yeah. So people do that all the time. People misremember all the time. Sometimes they misremember just like, I just have no idea. And sometimes they think they know, but they're actually just hallucinating. Happens all the time. Not a big deal. How many times did people ask you to recall accurate details? Scott, last Tuesday, what brand of jeans were you wearing? Like, I don't know. I don't even know. Did I wear jeans last Tuesday? Did I even put on clothes last Tuesday? It's not a guaranteed yes. Another thing is errors tend to cluster by body size. People who are larger tend to wildly underreport their food intake. Surprise, because they eat too much and they're a little ashamed about it. And they shouldn't be ashamed, but it's understandable. Another one is by diet style. When you're on that, like, I'm saying, I make these jokes all the time. White people, I love you. Y'all are great. All fun, all love and respect, all, I'm saying, same team. And, saying some rich ass white people diets, like if you eat like at Whole Foods all the fucking time, you're going to be putting in that you eat 1 trillion veggies, even though you may or may not, just because your diet style is ultra healthy, you're just going to conform to that expectation. And of course, social habits, people who exercise, people who go on hikes and stuff like that, they'll fill these surveys out in a way that is biased specific to their group that you wouldn't get with any other group. So one thing is to get biases that are random or statistically aggregated to average, like everyone underreports or overreports XYZ. That's not even true here. There are subgroups, large subgroups of people that make the data very difficult to apply. And of course, very, very fuzzy input to output claims. So you say, food X causes disease Y. And the reason we know this is surveys of people who ate food and didn't eat food, and we looked up their disease conditions in their medical charts. That's really, really shaky. And what we can't be sure of for sure is exactly that. Tiny effects from single foods gotten from food surveys. So for example, you'll see, by the way, this is headline gold. So if you're a press writer in the mainstream media and you need a nutrition article, ignore everything I just said, do the very literal opposite. So your next title of the article is, does half an egg a day prevent cancer? Or if a really slow news day, the next day you go, does a whole egg per day cause heart disease? Easy. XYZ egg or whatever changes risk by XYZ amount. This is when you get from aggregate data, and it's basically useless. There was Scott, do you remember there was a newspaper article a while back ago, or like some hubbub going around? They found that eating eggs was multiplying your cardiovascular risk more than smoking cigarettes.
I don't, but I can't keep track of all the egg.
Yeah. What a controversial food, the egg,
It's like the best, it's the worst. I don't know anymore.
You're doing some like blind dating and you're like, okay, like who's up next? Your friends picked him. They're like, he's a really great guy. You're like, okay. What does he do for work? Like he's actually a high powered corporate lawyer. Like, okay. Is he tall? Like he's 6'3". Like, okay. So like, wait, why is he blind dating? What's the catch? You're like, He's an egg. Like, you want me to die of cancer on the date? Like, but he's good for heart disease. Like, oh, God damn it. I gotta go Google him and see all this nonsense. So all that kind of stuff is just not something you can derive from this kind of data. But people do it all the time. Now, what's still true? What can we get out of these surveys? They can rank general patterns, very general patterns. For example, people who eat more plants and people who eat fewer ultra-processed foods tend to have better health outcomes. That's in part because of the plants and ultra-processed foods, but especially with ultra-processed foods, it's not even directly because they're not ultra-processed. It's because ultra-processed foods tend to be high palatability, high calorie load, and tend to cause caloric excess, which is really what causes the bad stuff. Usually it's a very small fraction of the ultra-processing itself. Because remember, casein protein, whey protein, egg protein, all that stuff, all the protein shakes, wildly, insanely highly processed foods. I mean, they're processed into a when's the last time you guys saw chocolate powder come out of a cow's fucking udder? It never happens. How the hell does it look like chocolate powder when it's made of milk? How much processing do you get to have something that look completely different? Imagine you bought broccoli, but it was in the form of a black solid bar. You'd be like, okay, broccoli doesn't look like this, but we all take whey protein and they're like, oh yeah, it's healthy. And it's totally right. Whey protein is healthy. It's not the processing per se that makes it bad. It's the fact that people who eat a lot of, eat at 7-Elevens and Burger Kings tend to overeat their calories and have a lot of not so great for you fats in high concentrations. And all that's where all the health comes from, all the bad health stuff. So the bigger picture stuff is okay. The precise personal recommendations, like me, is an individual who's 47 years old and lives in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and rides their bike 3 times a week to work. Should I be having 4 eggs a day or 5 eggs a day? Survey literature cannot give you that answer. So don't get ripped off. Don't overhaul your diet because of one headline. You guys, this is such a big deal. People, I've seen this. I'm 41 years old. I've seen this come and go even since I was a child. Scott, do you remember in the late 90s, early 2000s, there were basically the milk wars where like every other study or headline was like milk is causing cancer and it's going to kill you. And every other one was like milk is an immortality food. Like,
yeah, it's the same as eggs. It's like
same as eggs.
Or the other, yeah.
Same as eggs. Meat's been through all of this. More recently, veggies have been found to have anti-nutrients in them. So eating broccoli is bad. Don't overhaul your whole diet because of one headline. That would be really stupid. And look for agreement across methods. If you have studies that show food intakes, very good logs, recency logs, like last day of eating type of stuff, photos of foods, laboratory markers of blood work, short trials where they replace foods, and your own experience of foods. If all those line up, you're like, okay, olive oil seems like everything lines up. And when I eat lots of olive oil and less butter, I actually feel better. My blood work is better for myself. Looks like olive oil is in. That's how to do it instead of just looking at surveys. Now, for the science side, how to fix the science, I mean, using logging apps that have photos that you take of every single food. This is getting better and better. Again, you can just like eliminate foods from the photo and then eat it later and not log. That's still a problem. Barcode stuff. The best way to do it is usually just to have small groups living inside of a hospital metabolic ward, and they get to eat kind of whatever they want. And then you sort of follow along and see how they do. That's really, really tough to do. Also, sharing data so others can replicate your work is a really, really good thing. So that's the situation for self-reporting food surveys. A lot of people think this is the core of nutritional science, and they want a lot of data out of it that's very good. And that's just not where good data comes from. Number 2, from headlines to bottles, the supplement hype conveyor belt. So what's happening? People, we find in maybe even a pretty good study that people, often just from case reports, people who eat more of nutrient X get less disease or more muscle or something like that. We take X, whatever that nutrient is, we put it in a pill, and then we do big trials on it. And the big trials often show little or no benefit and sometimes even show harm. That's right. That's a real thing. And so a lot of people, by the time they got the data of, okay, the big food surveys say people who eat more of X have less of X disease, and then they see the supplement that has more of X in it, they just buy it. And then the studies come out later that's saying, hey, actually, this doesn't do anything, but they've already spent $200 on pills and God knows what effect on their health. Ideally, what studies like this should tell us is which isolated nutrients actually reduce the probability of disease in real life over the years. But this stuff breaks in at least 3 different ways. eating a nutrient in whole foods is not the same thing as taking a pill in many ways. One is nutrients combined with others can enhance or detract absorption. Another way is if you have one food that you have tested and it's got an amount of some kind of something in there that seems to improve health, what you're actually looking at is maybe 5 or 6 other, or maybe 500 or 600 other compounds that could be doing the work. You just don't measure them on the back end. So if you say, aha, we feed people more meat and they become more muscular, and it's the creatine in the meat that's doing this, so you need to eat more creatine. And someone raised their hand like, what about the protein in it? Like, yeah. Well, I guess it could be the protein, huh? All right, good job, Johnson. You moved to the front of class. And all of a sudden it's like, but we've been feeding people creatine for years and thinking that's the only thing that meat does. That's not the exact example because luckily that's not a thing with creatine, but this happens all the time. You pick eggs, some random vitamin in eggs, and you're like, this is the vitamin that people aren't getting enough of, and it's generally not the case. A lot of times, the studies that have the situation where they, people eat more of X and they get less disease, it turns out the confounder variable is these people are just eating healthier food overall and have healthier lifestyles. You get people who do a lot of physical activity, who sleep really well, who manage their stress well, who are not obese, who are having a really good family dynamic and relationships and eat mostly healthy foods. You can draw all sorts of correlations like, aha, it's the fiber. And the fiber is a good thing, but it's not going to save you from a diet and lifestyle that's total shit. And a lot of times people say like, oh, it's the fiber that's doing all this work. Like, no, the fiber does 5% of it. 95% of the difference between groups is all the other stuff that you should be doing that's not caught up in the data. And the problem with the big breaking is when you properly test this, you see you have 2 groups. One group gets supplement X, the other group gets a placebo. After 12 weeks, you actually see no change and sometimes even worse health markers for the people supplementing. And then that's where shit hits the fan, which is why kind of nutrition science is broken, because we get initial data saying, hey, look, this is a cool relationship. People run with it. And then when we actually test the relationship rigorously in double-blind placebo-controlled trials, we end up having sometimes very disappointing results. And by then, people have already spent a lot of money. And some of those people so convinced the supplement is good for them, you're not even going to talk them out of it after that. So what we can't be sure of from these kinds of relationships is what specific groups might benefit from inadequate nutrients. So we say on a population level, we found that more people eat XYZ nutrient than they have better outcomes. But is that true for people of all the same different genetics? Right? Is that true of people who have true deficiencies only? Or is this a nutrient where the more you eat up to a point, the better it is, even if you're not truly deficient? Because a lot of people say like, you need more vitamin D. And it's like, well, what's your vitamin D level right now? Like, well, I don't know. I just take more. Like, shouldn't you take enough to get it normal and then stop after that? Like, I don't know. More is better. And sometimes more is better. Protein to a very high point, more is better. But for some vitamins and minerals, as soon as you have enough, you're good to go. We can't tell with these kinds of studies. And of course, certain conditions. Like some fraction of the population might have a condition where they inappropriately process some nutrient and they are the big data set that experiences these benefits, but we don't know that. We don't even know this condition is real. We're like, oh, it looks like, 53% of the sample improved their health as a result of this pill. And it turns out just half of them have this deficiency that or a certain condition that nobody else has. You don't know that. You buy the supplement, you're like, this is going to improve my health. And it turns out there was nothing wrong with you to begin with. It's kind of like caffeine and ergogenics for people that have naturally a lot of energy and wake up really kind of fresh in the morning. Like to them, stimulant pre-workouts don't do nearly as much as it is to people who really need the boost. But when you study stimulant pre-workouts, that's not accounted for. You would say, oh, everyone benefits from this incredibly, which is absolutely not the case. Now, what's still true about this? Fixing real deficiencies absolutely matters. If you go to the doctor's office and you get your blood work done and it shows you are deficient in vitamin D, supplementing with vitamin D is usually a very good idea, ideally from whole foods, but even pills are way better than not. And a few basics help in clear cases. Creatine supplementation, fiber supplementation if you're deficient in that, things like that. But most miracle pills, this new formula was found to blah, blah, blah. Mostly they do nothing, unfortunately. Now, if you want to know how to not get ripped off, first of all, if the claim is prevents heart attacks, but the study reference doesn't actually measure heart attacks, it measures some kind of composite third-tier cardiovascular disease predictive score that's not even direct, man, I probably wouldn't pay money for something that has such a long reach to the actual target that it wanted to affect. What you want if you're going to take supplements, look for pre-planned trials, which means they say we're studying this, so they can't fudge the methods ahead of time, and clear doses, robust doses from good sources, human outcomes, not just rodent data, ideally, and independent repeats. This is something that creatine and caffeine and whey protein all have had for them in hundreds of studies, so we know they're good. But if a new supplement comes out and it might do something based off one rodent study, gee whiz, man, I just probably wouldn't invest into it for safety, for sure, and also for getting your hopes up on effect. Of course, on the fixing the science side, it's a good idea to start using genetic tests for people and then modifying their intake to see how that interacts with genetics. Baseline blood levels are also good to test. Like vitamin D supplements can be shown to work really well in people who have poor genetics for converting skin radiation into the part of the process to make vitamin D, and for people who have low vitamin D levels. But it turns out for people who have good conversion in normal sunlight and for people that are have high vitamin D levels to begin with, it turns out supplementing is not a good idea, and just everyone should be on more vitamin D might not be the thing. And of course, running, and this is something we'll hear a lot, already heard a lot from, run focused, well-designed, long enough trials, and then publish all the data, even the duds. There's a problem that sometimes people run a study, especially if it's corporate funded or if it's lab funded by someone with an ideological interest, then, which is almost all the time, then the study doesn't say what they want. They might just like shelve the study, not publish it, and then publish another study instead that comes up with good results. So you can see like half the time the results say it doesn't do anything. Half the time it says it does something a little bit. If you just don't ever publish the studies that say it doesn't do anything, you're like, oh my God, 95% of these studies say it does something. That's called a file drawer effect. It's a really nasty thing in science, and we should be steering really, really clear of that sort of thing, because something doesn't work is just as good of data as something does work. It tells us something about the world. Like if you use data from your visual field to figure out how a room looks, there is not a 400-pound safe next to the door is just as good of data for you as there is a 400-pound safe over by the wall. It's good data either way. Not having something somewhere is a known thing. This doesn't improve your mood or your body composition or your health as far as a supplement goes, is a really good data, because then you could just not buy it, not have to take it. Whereas if we only publish positive data, we get a real distorted mix of what's going on. Next, number 3, good foods versus evil foods, otherwise known as the halo horns trap. Scott, I was looking for something in email and I logged onto your computer and I noticed you have pictures of digital waifus that have both halos and horns at the same time, and they're in like angel devil composite outfits. What does that mean?
I mean, it's like, dichotomy, right?
Right. Like, is she a good girl or a bad girl?
Bad girl. Sometimes I'm in the mood for good. Yeah. Sometimes I'm in the mood for bad. Naughty, you get both, in one package.
What if you're in the mood for good, but devil girl shows up? Uh-oh.
I guess I need to be punished.
Yeah. What if you're in the mood for bad, but angel girl show up? And after a while, you're like, honestly, I just kind of want more than making out and hugging. Yeah.
That would suck.
That would suck. What? Where were we? Here's the deal with good foods and evil foods. The internet loves to war about this. And there is a warrior in the comments, 2 of them at least. Natural Foods Karen versus seed oils never enter my body Frank. And they're not versus each other, they're versus the whole rest of the world. And they know the truth that some foods are poison and other foods will save you. And Scott, how many times have you read renditions of like kind of like a little mini life history of that they were in terrible health, etc. Then they started eating macadamia nut oil, and they have an after picture of them with like a 6-pack or an 8-pack. Like
every time.
This is what did it for me. And I'm scientifically illiterate. So clearly this is what worked and has to work for everyone else. So we got saints, olive oil, berries, we got sinners, butter, sugar, seed oils, and we want to know what's good and what's bad. We want very simple, and unfortunately, that's not the reality. Ideally, what these sorts of insights should tell us is what to replace with what. Not is fat bad, but if I eat less butter, what's the better swap? Because I'm still having the same amount of fat, what kind of fat is better than not? Where does this break? First, studies often ignore the swap. If you trade butter for pastries, you're trading butter for the same amount and even more fat, arguably, plus more carbs and thus more calories. So you're going to say, yeah, I cut out butter, but just replaced it with snack foods and I didn't get any healthier. That's a bad idea. And remember, if you tell people to cut out butter, they have a certain hunger level, they cut out their butter, you're not telling them what to replace it with. They're just going to replace it with probably more bullshit food, and that's not any better than butter. A better trade is replacing butter with olive oil, which could be a really good thing. The other thing is not all saturated fats are created equal, and the vessel in which they come very much determines how good or bad they are for you in context. For example, cheese and butter and pastries all have saturated fats, but cheese and butter and pastries, and especially whole milk, affect your health very differently based on the circumstance. Headlines will flatten context, which is dose and person and blood markers. If you have a gazillion pounds of butter and you're a person that reacts really poorly to high blood fats, you will have blood markers that show that you are really, really, really in not so good health eating butter. Another person who eats a moderate amount of butter, not a ton, responds really well to those fats, can have like all the butter they want and their health is totally great. And inevitably you will hear from those people in the comments as well, as if to retort, well, I eat lots of butter and I'm fine. Hey, thanks, Jim. I guess it's all some kind of data. It's just not very good data. So what we can't be sure of from this kind of insight is one perfect limit for everyone. People respond differently. Oh my God, Scott, my dad sent me this one charlatan fuckstick on YouTube who doesn't even like his, I don't know if he speaks English. It's like transliterated and he sort of appears awkwardly in like the bottom left-hand corner of the YouTube videos. And he exclusively targets older people. So all his videos are like men in your 70s, what you need to know. And a lot of it's about erectile dysfunction. And like, he like recommends exact amounts of food, Scott, like 2 eggs per day in the morning for breakfast.
God.
And my dad's like, is that good? And I'm like, oh God. Oh my God.
That's like elderly abuse. That's like effed up. You're like targeting the elderly because they'll like
100%.
that shit and buy his shit or whatever.
100%.
Yeah, that's messed up.
Awful. People respond differently. How many eggs should you have for breakfast is not an answerable question outside of context. If you respond really well to high levels of saturated fat, which some people do, if you have a high protein diet, which some people need, if you're a larger individual and you need plenty of calories and you tend to work a little bit better mentally on lower carbs than higher carbs, you can legitimately have 8 eggs for breakfast every fucking day of your life and be the healthiest version of you that you can be. If you have opposite characteristics, you're a smaller person. If you are really sensitive to a lot of cholesterol and a lot of saturated fats, for blood work, it doesn't do you any good. And you're not in a particular, you get your protein from other sources. Guess how many eggs you can have for breakfast and be your healthiest self? 0. Anywhere between 0 and literally like a dozen eggs could be the answer for you. So when someone says 2 eggs a day is recommended, it is nonsense advice for any real human to apply. It is absolutely nonsense advice. Period. What's still true? Swapping some things for others can work. Swapping some animal fats out and swapping in nuts and seeds and olive oils tends to improve bad cholesterol and related particles in most people, though not all. Here's another piece of good news. From lots of this kind of data, we've learned that eggs and dairy, on average, look neutral to modestly helpful for health within the context of an overall solid diet. So the entire thing about fearing eggs and dairy is out completely. But at the same time, if you are an individual person, you should be eating in a certain way and checking blood markers every now and again to see how you respond, because people are different in subtle ways that matter. How to not get ripped off. When someone says you should eat XYZ, you go compared to what? If they can't answer compared to what, or if their comparison sucks, you don't have to take their advice. For example, RFK, in his infinite wisdom, says that we need to replace seed oils with beef tallow. Now, if you look at the research on how beef tallow affects health, it's the fucking same as seed oils, arguably worse if you extract it and calorie control and everything like that. If you're eating fast food, beef tallow ain't gonna save your ass. So that is a fucking nonsense replacement that's dead in the water. Another great RFK line, thanks RFK, is that if we use cane sugar, real sugar in soda, it'll be better than high fructose corn syrup. And that's total nonsense. We actually have recorded a whole video on how that's all total bullshit. So don't get ripped off of people saying this is better than that. Look for the hard data to show that's actually true. Don't be like, oh, that makes sense. It's natural. And here's the thing. If you prefer, for example, higher fat foods, watch your own weight trends and blood work. If you're eating plenty of saturated fats, and your blood work is really goddamn good, try eating lower saturated fats, higher unsaturated and monounsaturated fats, and do that for a few months. If your blood work is no better or even a little worse and you feel not so great or you feel the same, it looks like every answer is for you. But if your blood work's way better still on those modified, less saturated fats, then shit, and you got an answer for how to stay healthier for longer. You have to try this shit yourself. You can't just take baseline advice. How do we fix the science? Better swapping, longer trials, better adherence in trials. Good luck figuring that out. Check real outcomes. So follow people for a long time after to see if their disease conditions change. Lab signals, short term, 8-week diet, and it looks like my, various cholesterol lipoproteins changed is good insight, but not perfect insight. Number 4, this is a big one. Luckily, it's on the downslope. A few years ago, it was a really, really big deal because, again, white women found out about it and they do go on social media a lot. The microbiome, okay? What is the microbiome? It's all of the bacteria that you have in your gut, okay? And there's like trillions of them in there, these bacteria, and they have different populations of different kinds of bacteria. And usually in a balance, they're pretty good for you. They're actually critical to your health. But if you eat some kinds of foods less and more kinds of foods more, then the fraction of various bacteria can change. And that can affect, first of all, how your poop looks and smells. It also actually potentially affect your health. Absolutely. Now, what ideally the science should tell us and doesn't is which exact strains of bacteria that if you have more or less of help fix which problems, at what doses, for which people, and how long those changes last and how universal they really are. In the real world, there's a lot of breaking points here. Different labs get different answers, their methods vary, their samples are often small and inconsistent, and cause and effect tend to be tangled. We find someone who has dysbiosis, which really just means we don't like what we see. It's not the typical pattern. Did the dysbiosis cause their health problems? Are their health problems causing the dysbiosis? Is it both? Because imagine you had health problems that caused your gut bacteria to be dysbiotic or out of whack, and we fixed your gut bacteria. Well, now hold on a second. That doesn't fix the actual problem. Is like imagine you found Liver King, and due to his interesting use of steroids, he's beet red, and you're like, we can fix the redness, and so you just give him a cream to rub on his skin that makes his skin looks like a normal Caucasian color person. Well, you're like, hey, we did it. His skin is fine. But the skin was being caused by high blood pressure and various androgen effects. That's what's actually killing him. The dysbiotic bacteria could be a result of your health, or a cause, or both. And a lot of that we just don't know. What we can't be sure of then is that specific strain of your of bacteria is causing your specific issue. And if we fix it, is that going to be a thing that fixes it, or do the effects just come back months later? What is still true, what we know for sure in the microbiota world and the gut bacteria world, is that better diet quality, which in this case means more plants, more minimally processed foods, more fiber, comes with more plants, and some fermented foods, though not like crazy white woman at Whole Foods, everything is fermented kind of energy, nudges the gut in a generally eubiotic situation where we don't think anything's thrown off. The effects are typically modest. They're not magical. Here's how not to get ripped off. And this is a big one. This is something I actually learned doing the research for this. I didn't know. This is a big deal. Probiotics are often strain specific. So if you're taking a probiotic, a certain kind of bacteria will enhance itself in your gut. But how do you know how those puzzle pieces fit together? Probiotics, most people just take. They're like, probiotics, they're good for your gut. And you're like, how? They're like, they help the good bacteria. Like, how do you know it's good bacteria? How do you know you don't have too much good bacteria? Now it's bad bacteria. Like, I don't know any of those things. I got you. But you still buy that shit, right? Like, right? But Scott, the Erewhon grocery store packages the probiotics in such a nice package.
Of course they do. And I bet it's cheap as well.
No, it's expensive, which tells me it really works.
Oh, yeah.
What, you think they'd really charge me a lot of money for something that didn't do anything?
Oh, yeah.
Here's the thing. There's only one real thing, and that's your condition that you have with your actual strain that's dysbiotic, how you control that strain. That's an individual case, and general stuff doesn't really apply it. If a label on a gut product promises effortless weight loss, decrease inflammation, blah, 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 you can gently put it back and walk away. It almost certainly doesn't do that. Now, how do you fix the science? Really just need more science here. Standard lab methods across sites, track exact strains instead of just like, oh, there's more or less bacteria, share data and code, run bigger, longer trials. A lot of these things are the same. We just need more and better science. Luckily, AI is here to come help us with that, but we need a lot more science until we can make very precise recommendations. Lastly, number 5, flashy gym extras like timing, various powders, and other what you can call unicorns. Take this and it'll be amazing. What this is trying to give you kind of tiny edge tactics, perfecting your meal timing and citing studies, branch chain amino acids, exotic boosters that promise you a new you by, well, Thursday at the latest. What the studies here should tell us in nutritional science, ideally they don't, is they should give us small, reliable benefits once total protein, total calories, and training are equated. That means we know it's the supplement causing it. Problem. Here's where the breaking points are. When daily protein is matched, timing mostly fades away. It's still like 10% of the equation, but 10% sure as shit, not 50%. It turns out that if you eat enough daily protein, how often you need to eat protein is much more of a, well, just get it all in for the day and you're pretty much good. If you want to optimize, that's there for you. But if you're under eating protein, timing matters a lot because your body's running on empty. Here's a great way to put this analogy. If you only get to fill up your car with a gallon of fuel at a time, or 5% charge on your electric car, timing the gas stations or charging stations is critical so you're not left out in the middle of the road with no charge or no fuel. But if you get a full tank or a full battery charge, you're driving for hundreds of miles. It doesn't matter. Same goes for protein. Most studies do not account for that. Here's another interesting insight. Branch chain amino acids don't beat simply eating enough complete protein. So why would you eat BCAAs if a whey protein is just better? Whey protein not only gives you the branch chain amino acids, it also gives you all the other amino acids, not to just stimulate the construction, not to just be anti-catabolic, but be pro-anabolic as well. It's just better, period. It's like you get you pay $500 for a computer. One of them is just the CPU, and one of them is the same CPU plus a really awesome monitor. Where are you going to spend your $500? It's ridiculous. You get another whole thing for it. And arguably, protein is are usually cheaper than BCAAs. So figure that one out. You're really, really getting screwed up for the money thing. And very often, popular powders, for example, glutamine, which, Scott, people actually still buy. Remember we did that
Yes.
thing a few months ago, and it was like hundreds of millions of dollars a year spent on glutamine? Guys, glutamine never did anything except for people who were really, really sick with intestinal problems and their immune system was fucked up. That's the only way glutamine helps you. That's it. Right. So everyone is getting it ripped off with glutamine, and it's a little pixie dust bullshit that doesn't work. Now, what we can't be sure of is that these kinds of general eat enough protein things wipe away everything. For example, under conditions of very low calories, you may need more protein and timing might matter more. Extreme training loads might also modify that. And for older lifters, we know that timing and protein amount is more important. So we can't just say, oh, nothing matters, because that's the other tempting thing to do is be like, just get enough protein, you're good to go. Like, that's not it. That's not it by a long shot. It's a better approximation than timing matters a ton, but you can say, hey, look, getting enough protein is the most important thing. Timing makes the difference, but if you get it remotely correct, it's most of the battle right there. What's still true is the big rocks still win. Enough protein, calories matched to your goal, progressive training, solid sleep. And if you want to take supplements, there's a few that are good. 2 examples are creatine and caffeine. They work damn near every single time. How to not get ripped off is by asking questions like, okay, so when you're saying this supplement helped, was protein intake matched between groups? Were the groups both training? Were these weight trained populations? If you can't answer those, it's not a good idea to take these supplements because you just don't know. Other things you want is multi-week studies in trained lifters with real outcomes, strength, muscle size, performance measures of various kinds, body fats, not single session blips. If you show that you take a supplement and all of a sudden it triggers anabolic machinery, that in many studies has shown to actually cause long-term growth. But in many studies, a little blip on the anabolic machinery does nothing for the overall long-term because your body instantly desensitizes to it. The next time you take the supplement, nothing happens. And you've only had enough area under the curve for growth for like 30 minutes at a time. Out of 24-hour day, you're growing extra for 30 minutes by 5%. And so, and that mutes itself after a while because your body's just like, no, I've seen the supplement before, it doesn't work. And so how do you know that a supplement causes muscle gain? Man, ideally you have a study where it's 2 groups, double blind, one takes the supplement, one doesn't, and the other group actually gains substantially more muscle or at least more rep strength or something like that. Any kind of real outcome data is really good. Acute studies, they're not so awesome in this regard. How to fix the science? Again, bigger, longer trials on trained people, changing one conditions at a time, no opaque methods, everything very transparent, and publishing the results where nothing happened. Because a lot of times nothing happens and supplement companies are like, I don't know about this. Supplements like terkestrone, for example, basically have like 1.5 studies on them, and the 1.5 studies said it doesn't do anything. And then the other studies are on related molecules that say also they don't do anything. One study says it does something, but it never got replicated. That's exactly the kind of shit you want to stay the fuck away from. So the probability that it works well is very, very low. It's almost random chance. Guys, that's the situation. In summary, nutrition science isn't useless. It's just better at minimums, maximums, and general patterns than at tiny personal optimizations for you. Use the studies that replicate really sound research that over decades has shown this actually works. Largely ignore the hype and track your own results, your weight trends, your performance, your sleep, your blood work. Stick to a very similar diet, change 1 or 2 things at a time. And over the long term, combining that with good data, you can have a better and better diet and better results. But if you think like, I'm going to take this one supplement, or, everyone's eating too many eggs, including me, you've got another thing coming. Folks, if you need help with your diet, the RP Diet Coach app is something I use every single day. It is just absolutely wonderful for me in my prep. Even in my off season, I use it all the time so I can hit my exact macros, my exact calories, log everything I need, and be 100% certain that I'm leaving nothing to chance. If that's something you're interested in, link in the description, go buy stuff, click around. It's on the iTunes store and Google Play. And I'm going to go play with myself now. What? No, I'm not going to do that now. Maybe later. Maybe later. What? See you guys next time.